May I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Brownstone?
Here.
Councilmember Rohrbach?
Here.
Councilmember Reddick?
Here.
Vice Mayor Jimenez?
Here.
Mayor Penrose?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. We will now stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions or refusals? Thank you. Next, we have proclamations and presentations, and we will have a Mid-Coast Community Council update.
Yes, Greg?
Know about the hate speech thing we're also preparing for. We're going to watch with interest what you're doing, and we're hoping for some guidance from the county. I want to mention the community broadband, community fiber network effort that we were and still are pursuing. We got some help from Carlo Way and Matt, but it's been stalled because when we tried to fill out the grant application, there were 50 questions that required technical information we couldn't answer without a feasibility study. Now, we had previously requested the county fund a feasibility study for $100,000 several months back, and we've gotten no answer on that. So without the technical information, it's tough to file a grant application and answer all the questions. But we're not going to give up. The county's position on this seems to be in stark contrast to Marin County and other counties in the state. I'm going to try and set up a meeting with Marin County to find out how they provided leadership to get their county moving forward. You may know that Quarry Park allows off-leash dogs. That plan has now been endorsed by the MCC with some requests for enforcement. We're happy to have an off-leash dog opportunity for our residents. And you're probably aware that the Highway 1 Moss Beach corridor is beginning, but there's still no trail to Montera, and the timeline for implementation spans to 2030. Future concerns coming up would be a tenant protection ordinance that we're going to be asked to comment on, independent oversight of the sheriff, which is something I believe we already dealt with to some degree, but we have been approached by a group to comment on that. There's some damage to the Montera Mountain from road maintenance, which we're concerned about would cause erosion and hamper recreational use. And then the concerns we have about stormwater stemming from the storm of New Year's Day this year remain unaddressed by the county, although they have heard them. I note in passing that the climate action plan on your website for this meeting doesn't mention stormwater. And I just preview what I think you're going to see in our report, which is that the storms used to design stormwater treatment are woefully inadequate in the face of climate change. And what they do is they pass the risk onto existing residents instead of requiring builders to fully mitigate the risks of the additional impermeable surfaces that are being built. This is something that's become very bad up where we are. I can't speak to Half Moon Bay, but I encourage you to take a look at the issue of stormwater in your climate adaptation plans. And that's it for me. Any questions?
Thank you, Greg. Next, we have Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District update.
Okay, now can you hear me? Wonderful. Well, I'm delighted to be here. Greetings, Mayor Penrose, members of the council. My name is Zoe Kirstein Tucker. I represent Ward 7 on the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District Board of Directors. That includes the wonderful city of Half Moon Bay, the Mid-Coast, north to Pacifica, and then up and over Skyline to include Woodside, San Carlos, and Redwood City. I am one of 2 directors that represent San Mateo County. My other colleague is Margaret McNiven, and she represents the South Coast and areas east of that. I'm joined this evening by our most excellent governmental affairs manager, Joshua Hugg. And my goal this evening is to give you an update on the district and talk to you a little bit about some projects that I think will be most interesting to co-siters. But before I start, I want to offer you the most enthusiastic thank you for the partnership that you have created with the district and with Post on the Johnston Ranch project. This is an incredibly exciting and historic project and partnership, and one that I think will benefit the residents and visitors alike for many generations to come. And I hope it's one of many fruitful partnerships that we establish moving forward. Okay, Maggie, may I have the first slide? Thank you. All right, MidPenn's mission can really be summarized by the 5 words in the right-hand bar. Our goal, our mission with open space is to preserve, protect. Can you see now? Okay, so back to that sidebar on the right. Our mission with respect to open space is to preserve, protect, restore, educate, and enjoy. And specifically on the coast side, we are dedicated to the preservation of agriculture and also the preservation of the rural character of the coastside. Next slide, please. All right, this map depicts MidPenn's extent, if you will. We're comprised of over 70,000 acres of protected open space on the San Francisco Peninsula. MidPenn is one of the largest open space districts in California. Our district boundaries extend from the Pacific Ocean all the way east to the Bay, to the San Francisco Bay, south to Los Gatos, and north to Pacifica. A few facts about the district. We celebrated our 50th anniversary last year, and in those 50 years, we've created 27 preserves with over 250 miles of trails. And we were very honored to be able to have one of our celebrations here in Half Moon Bay. It was widely attended, and we had a great time. We hope you all did too. Our open space preserves are free and open to the public every single day of the year. Our 7-member board represents more than 760,000 constituents over a 3-county area. We estimate that last year alone, our preserves received about 3 million visitors. Okay, next, some project updates with this lovely slide of a California quail, our state bird. Next slide, please. Okay, let's start with Purisima Creek Redwoods Open Space Preserve. 24 miles of trails for hiking, biking, horseback riding, wheelchair accessible trails, and bathroom. The centerpiece of this 4,700-acre preserve is Purisima Canyon, with its towering redwoods, rushing creek, and understory of ferns, berries, and wildflowers. And when I look at this picture, I immediately I can smell this preserve. There's something about the lush green forest, redwood forest, that's so, it's like balm to the soul. So speaking of redwoods, this is one of the oldest trees in the world. In fact, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, redwoods were the dominant trees in the northern hemisphere. Today, coast redwoods are found only along the coast in a narrow band stretching from southern Oregon just south to Monterey. The trees seen at Purisima Creek Redwoods Preserve are only about 100 years old. They make up what is called a second growth forest. The original redwood forest was logged in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Those redwoods were probably close to 1,000 years old when they were cut. The large stumps along the Purisima Creek Trail are evidence of those trees. This preserve was created with a $2 million grant from the Save the Redwoods League. And I do want to mention, with regard to Purisima Creek, definitely take a look at our website if you're thinking about going out there, because we're still dealing with storm damage from last winter. Lower access is closed due to the road access along the road, limited access along the road. The entire preserve is closed to horses due to storm damage, and the Whitmore Gulch Trail is closed currently to bikes and horses. So we're working as fast as we can, but the preserves took a lot of damage during those storms last winter. Okay, next slide, please. This is one of the more exciting things that we're involved with right now. This is the Persimmon to the Sea Trail. This trail is envisioned to be roughly 15 miles long, a regional trail connecting the Persimmon Creek Redwoods Open Space Preserve to the San Mateo County coast. The trail would create a critical east-west linkage in the regional trail network from the Bay Area Ridge Trail all the way over to the California Coastal Trail. Ultimately, this trail, we hope, will become part of an even larger regional trail known as the Bay to the Sea Trail, which is currently being studied by POST and will encompass 40 miles of continuous east-west regional trails connecting the bay to the ocean. All right, let's see, next slide, please. Last week, I'm pleased to say the board of directors approved 2 contracts, one to do the engineering for the trail work, and the second to do the engineering and design and permitting for a parking area to the south. So just to orient you, this area is about 5 miles south of downtown Half Moon Bay. I'm hoping you can see Highway 1 farthest to the left and Verde Road. There is a parking area that is being studied now, a multimodal parking area that's envisioned there with a loop trail, and then you can see the trail meandering up to the Bay Area Ridge Trail. So let's see if there's anything else I wanted to talk about here. There will be 2 crossings, 2 safe crossings of Verde Road that we're looking at, and also, as you can see, here, maybe I can point this. I don't know how to use that. Anyway, there will be a trail along Verde Road so people don't have to walk on the road to get to the Cal Purisima trail linkage over to the California Coastal Trail. So, very exciting project for us. Next slide, please. Yes, so I wanted to include this slide just so that you could see how the Persimmon to the Sea Trail kind of fits into this larger Bay to the Sea Trail network. The Purisima side, the coastal side, you see bifurcates, and we're envisioning that the northmost trail segment will actually come out through Johnston Ranch. The southern trail you just saw, and then it will extend all the way over to the bay. Next slide, please. Okay, we'll talk about another iconic coastal open space preserve, La Honda Creek. This is a 6,100-acre preserve with historic ranch lands, wildflowers, redwood forest, and so much more. This is also one of the locations where we have our several conservation grazing leases, which we'll talk about in a minute. I really wanted to highlight this area, and particularly the Red Barn, because it is so iconic, and because this preserve is so large and long. It extends almost from Highway 1 north to Skyline. So it's a long, slender preserve. So we've been trying for a long time to figure out how to help people get access to the middle part of the preserve. So back about 10 years ago, I think it was, 10 years ago? Anyway, we floated a concept for parking at the Red Barn and heard an overwhelming and resounding no. Nobody wanted to see cars parked around the Red Barn. So we took that to heart. Staff really went back to the drawing board. We convened a public access working group and are narrowing in on some other options for safe access for people to get into the center of this beautiful open space preserve. Okay, a new project, something that's kind of relatively new for us, is this Upper La Honda Restoration Forestry Project. The forest in the upper portion of La Honda Open Space Preserve have seen a long and varied history of logging. As a result, the forest habitat has degraded over time. MidPenn is currently embarking on this pilot to better understand this diverse but degraded habitat and learn how to restore it. So the goals of this project are to reduce wildland fire fuels to make the ecosystem more resilient, improve watershed conditions by improving stream crossings, decommissioning old logging roads. We're looking to accelerate the recovery of second growth forests and protect late sterile and old growth habitats, among other things. Stakeholder and public outreach will begin on this project in the next year or so. Okay, next one. This is one of my favorite accomplishments from last year when I was board president. The board approved the acquisition of phase 1 and phase 2 of the Cloverdale Ranch. This is truly an ecological jewel on the San Mateo County coast. Not only does this preserve contain vast and beautiful native grasslands and scrub, but it's also deeply intertwined with the agricultural history of the coast. The acquisition of Cloverdale Ranch is an effort that has been over 20 years in the making. You can see the project, as I mentioned, is broken up into 3 phases. The board approved phase 1 and phase 2 last year. We entered into an option with Post to hopefully acquire phase 3 in the 2025, 2026 timeline. We phased it because there are a lot of complexities with phase 3 that include the Lake Lucerne Mutual Water Company. So we want to take plenty of time to work with the landowners and neighbors down there to make sure we understand that complex water situation and understand what kind of infrastructure improvements are needed. But just a couple more accolades for this preserve. It contains it houses one of the healthiest and most sizable populations of the San Francisco garter snake and red-legged frog. So much more I could talk about, but hopefully you'll all get out there and visit sometime soon. All right, next slide. Yeah, this is let's go back to that for a second because it's so pretty. This is the Arroyo de Frijoles, or the Bean Hollow Lake structures in Cloverdale. Really quite beautiful. Okay. Next, something that's probably top of mind for a lot of us these days is our wildland fire resiliency efforts. This picture shows one of Mid-Penn Rangers assisting CAL FIRE in fighting the CZU Lightning Complex fire in 2020. This particular picture shows the Rangers working with CAL FIRE to help hold the old Hall Road to keep the fire from spilling up and over Skyline, which would have then allowed it to rage down to Crystal Springs. This fire really underscored for Mid-Penn the need to enhance its fuel reduction efforts while also protecting biodiversity through its ecologically sensitive vegetation management practices. Next slide, please. On the left, you'll see the latest fire hazard severity zone map. And as you can see, we operate in an area of extreme fire risk. On the right, you'll see the 4 components of our wildland fire resiliency program. The first of which is our vegetation management plan, which addresses creation and maintenance of fuel reduction areas for ecosystem health, fuel breaks, and defensible space zones using veg management techniques that include manual and mechanical removal of vegetation, the use of herbicides, and prescribed herbivory, which is really just another fancy way of talking about conservation grazing. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Our prescribed fire plan addresses the methods and implementation of prescribed fire to manage fuel and improve ecosystem health. We're continuing some environmental analysis of this and hope to launch our prescribed fire program next year. We've also created a set of wildland fire pre-plan and resource advisor maps. We've created a map for each of our districts, or each of our preserves, which provide information on existing conditions, key infrastructure, sensitive habitats, so that when fire agencies go into a preserve to fight a fire, they know what to avoid and what to protect. So we're distributing those maps with our partners. And finally, we have a monitoring plan that provides a framework for recording pre-project conditions, vegetation treatment response, and fuel inventories to inform future adaptive management techniques. Let's see. These are just a few slides that depict some of the ways in which we reduce fire risk. The top right slide shows district staff creating a shaded fuel break. The slide on the lower right is maintenance of a fuel break along Skyline Road. And on the left is a staff member who's actually tagging important plants, both so they don't get removed as we're managing the vegetation, or so that they can create islands of refuge for animals to escape from fire. All right, on to conservation grazing. On the coast side, this is a very important land management technique for Mid-Penn. If I could have the next slide, please. It helps us both protect and enhance the biodiversity of our unique grasslands. It also helps us reduce fire fuel loads on more than it's actually 11,000 acres now through this conservation grazing program. And it also allows us to support local agriculture with collaboration with our regional ranching community. You can see in this slide a depiction of all the different conservation grazing leases that we currently have on the coast. We're very proud of our conservation grazing partners because they really help us protect the lands without having to use a lot of chemicals and equipment. All right, I think that's all I wanted to say on that. And finally, this is a project that's really near and dear to my heart. It has to do with mountain lion and human interactions. Mountain lions are a specially protected species in California. Mid-Penn's 700,000 acres plus of preserved public open space provide prime habitat for these lions, a top predator facing many, many challenges in our region. We're working to protect regional mountain lion populations by preserving habitat, increasing habitat connectivity through projects like our Highway 17 Wildlife Crossing project, which we could spend a whole evening on. It's really an exciting project. We're promoting rodenticide regulation, and we support research that improves our understanding of lion populations, ecology, and behavior throughout our region. In 2020, Mid-Penn began working in partnership with the Santa Cruz Puma Project and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife in preserves with high visitation, specifically Rancho San Antonio and Montebello. We're fitting mountain lions with temporary tracking collars that provide GPS somewhat like a Fitbit fitness tracker. The collars don't adversely affect the lion, and they automatically fall off after a designated amount of time. This science that we're conducting here is aimed at the long-term conservation of these native predators. We're now in year 3 of this study. We've collared 23 mountain lions, 15 of which call Mid-Penn preserves their home. As part of this research project, the Puma Project is utilizing spatial data from the collars to assess factors influencing human mountain lion interactions, factors such as public trail usage, habitat type, and fuel management activities. We want to know what is it that we're doing as humans that are impacting these animals, and how can we reduce our interactions. In addition, the Puma Project is testing safe and humane ways to encourage lions to avoid human contact to reduce conflict. Although attacks by mountain lions are rare and generally not fatal to humans, mountain lions that attack humans are almost always euthanized. So at Mid-Penn, it's a real priority for us to ensure that we develop ways to prevent lions from habituating to human presence on our preserves. To reinforce their instinctual fear of humans, the Puma Project researchers are attempting to associate human voices with behavior modification methods, mainly noxious stimuli, that encourage the collared lions to avoid humans. Collared mountain lions are being carefully monitored now to quantify these responses to determine if the behavior modification actually works. We're extremely proud of this groundbreaking research and know that many other public agencies and municipalities are eagerly awaiting the results of this research with the hope that these techniques can be used in other areas to protect both mountain lions and the public. One last thing before we go to this questions. I did want to mention also here on the coast, we've been very attentive to the issue of mountain lion and livestock interactions and have been looking at ways to minimize those as well. We compensate ranchers for loss of livestock due to predation currently. We also are looking at the use of guardian animals, night penning, removing dead or sick livestock from the land, visual and audio deterrence. We're really looking at a variety of ways to assist our ranchers in minimizing livestock and lion interactions. All right, well, I've just talked your ear off, so I'll ask if you have any questions.
Zoe, thank you. That was wonderful. It is always wonderful to be reminded about the beauty of our coast and the diversity of our coast, and it's never gets old. It never gets old. It's wonderful to hear, and would love to hear even more about what's going on. Council, do you have any questions? I don't think so. Thank you very much.
Very good, thank you. We really appreciate the time that you give us to talk to you a little bit about what we do.
Absolutely.
Looking forward to continuing to be good neighbors.
You got it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we move on to mayor's announcements. I've got a statement that I'd like to read. We welcome speakers providing, no, a different statement. Okay, sorry. There are two things I need to say tonight, and I was reading the second one first. We are fortunate to live in a community of people who care about and help one another, who work hard to be inclusive, embrace diversity, and be accepting of others' beliefs and viewpoints. And from that perspective, I want to say that it truly saddens me, as I know it saddens you, to see the multiple military conflicts currently happening around the world. It's abundantly clear to me that a close, engaged community, like we have here in Half Moon Bay, is one of the most valuable and important things we can have for the health and well-being of our families. And that's really something everyone has in common, no matter where they are, no matter their background, their race, their religion. It's the desire for health, well-being, and a good life for their families and children. Our thoughts are with all people around the globe who are being impacted by the horror and devastation of war tonight. Our community stands together for peace, with the hope that these conflicts will soon come to an end and families who are affected may again have the opportunity to thrive. Okay. Now, Catherine Enberg, our attorney, have we any reports out from recent closed session meetings?
No, the council has not met in closed session since our last council meeting.
Thank you. Now we have city manager updates to council.
Madam Mayor, we actually don't have any updates for you tonight.
Boy, this is going to be a short meeting. My favorite kind. We now have public forum, and this is where I'm going to say something before we start public forum. We, the Half Moon Bay City Council, the Half Moon Bay City staff, all welcome speakers providing public comment. But please be advised, this is a limited public forum. As such, speakers must stay on topic if speaking to a particular agenda item. And if speaking during general public comment, they must address matters within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city of Half Moon Bay. If speakers fail to follow these rules or use profane language, they will be warned. And if they continue to disregard our rules, their opportunity to speak will be ended. Thank you. So now we go to public forum, and do we have anyone in the audience? We do. Our first speaker is Lisa Galligan, and she will be followed by Tim Costello.
Thank you. Hello. Hello. I would like to ask if the continued public show of support for BLM via the mural on City Hall is in need of review given the organization's statements concerning Israel and the war against Hamas. America's policy of unequivocal Israeli support is fundamental, and I'd like to know if the council feels the mural best represents our community currently.
Thank you. Tim Costello?
Greetings, how are you all tonight? I'm actually here to represent Sam, so you guys knew, and I'm inviting the entire city council, members of, obviously, the Half Moon Bay city employees, members of the public. We have an open house coming up at the Sewer Authority Mid-Coast side here in Half Moon Bay. I have some flyers that I will give to Jessica when I'm done. I just want to read off them. But I can also send out PDFs that you can distribute accordingly. So the open house is going to be at the treatment facility. It will be Saturday, November 18th, and it'll be from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. We'll have a meet and greet with the directors and staff. We'll have plant tours, beverages, snacks, games. I'm not sure what the games are. I wanted to have a dunk tank. I thought that would be humorous, but that didn't happen. So at any rate, yeah. So I'm going to keep it short, and I'm going to stop it there, and no need for any other comments, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. We are looking forward to that open house. I've personally been on a tour of the sand plant because I'm one of the directors, as has Debbie Ruddock here. It's a fascinating tour. It's a wonderful thing to really see what happens with sewage, believe it or not. Okay, next we have Rocio Avila, followed by Carolina Carbajal.
Buenas noches, miembros del concilio. Mi nombre es Rocío Ávila, miembro del Comité de Viviendas de Alas. La preocupación por la vivienda sigue aumentando en nuestra comunidad, y más en el tiempo en que se llevaría a cabo estos proyectos de vivienda asequible. Hoy escuché en la Junta de Supervisores del Condado de San Mateo que una manera que se puede agilizar esta construcción es unirse el condado, el estado, la ciudad y los miembros de las juntas de planeamiento en las ciudades, para poder trabajar todos juntos y encontrar una forma más rápida. Sabemos que es una emergencia la falta de vivienda aquí en Half Moon Bay y zonas no incorporadas del condado de San Mateo. También pedimos un control de renta aquí en Half Moon Bay para arrendatarios y protecciones para subarrendatarios. Encontrar la manera de informar a la comunidad sobre derechos y responsabilidades que ya existen y han existido por mucho tiempo. Pero muchos en la comunidad y personas que rentamos en lugares no tenemos conocimiento de que hay leyes y que hay derechos que tenemos, así como responsabilidades. Para nosotros es difícil navegar en las páginas donde tal vez está la información. Así que pido que haya volantes disponibles en diferentes idiomas para que nosotros podamos adquirir y tener más conocimiento. Pedimos control de renta, ya que familias y jóvenes se han estado desplazando a otros lugares por las altas rentas aquí. Muchas gracias.
Good evening. My name is Rocio Avila. I'm a member of the Committee of Housing from ALAS. The concern for housing continues increasing in our community, and mostly in the time that it will be will be completed, these projects of accessible housing. Today, I heard in the meeting of the supervisors from the county of San Mateo that a way that it would speed up the construction of this is joining, making a unity within the county, the state, the city, and the members of the different organizations that are planning in the cities, in these cities, in order to be able to work together and finding a faster way. We know that this is an emergency, the lack of housing here in Half Moon Bay and areas, unincorporated areas from the county of San Mateo. We also ask rent control in Half Moon Bay in order for the protection of the renters and sub-renters, finding a way to inform the community about the rights and responsibilities that already exist and have been existing for a long time. But many of the community and persons that rent in this place, we don't have the knowledge, and there are laws and rights that we have as well as responsibilities. For us, it's difficult to navigate in the pages, where maybe that information is present. So we ask that if you can make brochures available in different languages so we can acquire and have more knowledge. We ask rent control because families and youth have been displaced to other places because of the high rents here. Thank you.
Thank you, Rocio. Carolina.
Muy buenas noches a todos. Gracias por su atención.
Thank you all. Thank you for your attention.
Como ustedes saben, el propósito de nuestra visita siempre al cónsul es hablar sobre el control de la renta o la vivienda.
As you well know, that our purpose here and our talk here is always concerning rent control.
Ya que nuestra comunidad latina es una de las más afectadas en este momento.
As our Latin community here is one of the most affected in this time.
Lastimosamente, el control de la renta todavía no ha llegado. Le estamos dando largas a eso ahorita.
Unfortunately, rent control, it hasn't arrived yet. It's like we are seeing the long range of the time that is going through.
Sé que es un trabajo muy arduoso y me imagino que ha de ser muy cansado y tedioso.
We know that work is a very hard work, and I know that it must be very tedious to do that work.
Pero nuestro deber es informarles a ustedes de la boca de nuestra comunidad que está sufriendo.
But our responsibility is to talk to you about how our community is hurting.
Porque nuestra comunidad, mucha de ella tiene miedo de expresarse.
And being the voice for them, because most of our community is afraid of expressing itself.
Muchas veces por el miedo de su estado migratorio.
Many times because of the fear of the immigration status.
En algunas ocasiones es por falta de información.
And in other occasions it's because of the lack of information.
Pero queremos que sepan ustedes
But we want you to know
que somos una gran población en Half Moon Bay. Somos el 31.7% de la población.
we are a great population here in Half Moon Bay. We are 31.7% of the population of the city.
Que fue lo que pudo ser contado en el censo del 2022.
And that is what has been counted in the census of 2020.
Debido a que muchos de los latinos no quieren ser censados
Because many or most of the Latins, they don't want to be censored
por muchos miedos y creencias que ellos poseen.
because of the amount of fear and things that they have.
Mi punto con eso es que somos una población notable
My point is that we are a very noticeable population,
que está sufriendo en este momento
and we are suffering in this moment
porque la renta está excesivamente alta.
because rents are excessively high.
En mi caso personal,
In my personal case,
mi renta subió el 30%
my rent raised 30%
hace 3 meses.
3 months ago.
La excusa del dueño fue de
The excuse of the owner was
que para el tiempo del COVID no pudo subir la renta.
that during the COVID time he couldn't raise the rent.
Sé que hay leyes que abordan a eso,
I know that there are laws that take in consideration that,
pero sé que ellos también saben que nosotros no vamos a hacer nada.
but they know that we are not going to do anything about that.
Sé que muchas personas prefieren trabajar más y pagar más,
I know that many people they prefer to work more and pay more
para no perder sus casas,
in order not to lose their houses,
porque aquí no hay casas tampoco.
because there are no houses available here either.
No hay renta en Half Moon Bay.
There's no renting Half Moon Bay.
Y unas personas como nosotros, ganando el mínimo, tampoco le quieren rentar.
And people like us that we make minimum wage, they don't want to rent that.
Personas como con nuestros trabajos no calificamos para tener renta.
People with our jobs, we don't qualify to have rents.
Es gracioso que la comunidad que está produciendo comida, salud y bienestar a ustedes viva en estas condiciones.
It's funny to think that the community that is working in order to provide some kind of services and lifestyle here is going through that kind of troubles.
Así que les pedimos, por favor, una pronta solución al control de la renta.
So we ask, please, produce a rent control.
Ustedes tienen en sus manos el poder y cómo hacerlo.
You have in your hands the power and the way to do it.
Y espero que nuestras palabras les sirvan de conocimiento.
And I hope that our words, they serve as a way to know.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carolina. Jessica, do we have Zoom public forum speakers?
We do, yes. Our first is Kimberly Williams.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks, Mayor Penrose and council members. This is Kimberly Williams, and I'm speaking on behalf of the San Mateo County chapter of Surfrider Foundation. I wanted to let you all know that Surfrider has its annual Shocktober event tomorrow evening at the Half Moon Bay Yacht Club from 6 to 8 p.m. And we will have 2 scientists from the California Great White Shark Project talk about the recovery of the great white sharks in California. It's a family-friendly event, and we hope that you'll all come out and join us. We think it'll be a lot of fun, so we hope to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly.
And next we have Joanne Rokoski.
Hi, my name is Joanne Rokoski, and I'm a member of COSIDE Faith in Action and the Unitarian Universalist COSIDE community. First, I applaud the city staff for their work to create a framework for addressing rental protections, and I look forward to the study session with you when it occurs. I also applaud the commitment that you have shown towards this project. As these various kinds of protections are being considered, I urge special consideration of the needs of subtenants in Half Moon Bay. Because rents are so high and rental properties so limited, families crowd together out of desperation. You've heard many times the stories of how entire families share one room and how families take turns with other families to use the kitchen and how they line up to use the single bathroom. Despite this crowding, costs remain so very high compared to income. And so families prioritize paying the rent or paying for food or other necessities. And as described earlier by speakers, they fear that if they lose this housing, there will be no other option. So they stay quiet and they just pay the rent. This puts them at the mercy of a tenant who actually signed the lease and then dictates the terms for renting a room to subtenants. They need protection, even when they only have a verbal agreement. And by protecting subtenants, the city of Half Moon Bay can help them stay housed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joanne. Do we have any other public speakers?
There are no further speakers, Mayor.
Okay, we move on to the consent calendar. May I have a motion, please?
Yes, I move that we adopt the consent calendars, including items 1A, waive reading of resolutions and ordinances, item 1B, approval of minutes, item 1C, resolution denouncing hate speech, item 1D, receipt of legislative position letters, item 1E, emergency Seymour outfall repair update, item 1F, amendment number 3 to the maintenance agreement with Caltrans for maintenance responsibilities for the proposed East Side Parallel Trail North, segment 4, and items 1G, the SAM budget amendment request reserve funds.
Second.
May I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Brownstone?
Yes.
Councilmember Rohrbach?
Yes.
Councilmember Reddick?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Jimenez?
Yes.
Mayor Penrose?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We move on to ordinances and public hearings. And first, we have an introduction of an ordinance amending Title 13 Water and Sewer by adding Chapter 13.22 Fats, Oils, Grease, and Sand.
Thank you, Mayor Penrose. In the community, Mosbos, Virginia, Public Works Director, City Engineer, with Denise Hutton, our Associate Engineer tonight. Happy to be here for the first reading of our ordinance. Denise is going to be doing the presentation, and we're happy to take public comments afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Moz. Madam Mayor, City Council members, good evening. Tonight we have the public hearing for the Fats, Oils, Grease, and Sand Ordinance. This is an ordinance that would amend Title 13 of the Municipal Code, the Water and Sewer title, by adding Chapter 13.22, Fats, Oil, Grease, and Sand. We've notified the public about this ordinance. Here's a list of our public outreach, but I would like to bring your attention to the QR code that we have here on the right that would take you to the city website where we have a lot more information on the ordinance. So for the first reading, we'll be looking at a little bit of the background, and then we'll go through each of the ordinance articles before we move on to the next steps. So the State Water Resources Control Board passed an executive order that requires all public wastewater systems that are experiencing fog buildups to prepare and implement a source control program to reduce the amount of fog that's discharged into the sewer system. The source control program is supported by the California Plumbing Code. So the city does have, we do experience fog in our collection system. And we have some photos here that exemplify that. And the sanitary sewer overflow in the left-hand photo. So then why are we proposing this ordinance? For all the reasons that we have listed here. protect the public and private property, protect the environment, and to codify the city's legal authority to comply with the state requirements. So let's get into the ordinance. There's 6 articles to the ordinance. Articles 1 through 5 are sort of the nuts and bolts of the ordinance. They lay out a lot of details about the regulations and the prohibitions, inspections and compliance. Then when you get to Article 6, that is the administration of the FOG program, and it addresses how the city will administer the requirements of the ordinance through the city's FOG control program. So Article 1 explains the purpose, which we've talked about already, the applicability of the ordinance, and also includes some definitions, defines terms related to the FOG ordinance. We move to Article 2, and that's a pretty detailed article that identifies the prohibitions and regulations. It specifies certain requirements to the FOG dischargers, that they operate with best management practices, that they obtain a waste discharge permit, and importantly, that the waste FOG dischargers pre-treat their effluent before the effluent reaches the city sanitary sewer system. Those pre-treatment mechanisms are usually grease control devices like interceptors and grease traps. So in Article 3, we talk about those interceptors and grease traps, defining installation methods, how to size those traps and interceptors, how to locate them in the kitchen facilities so that the city can access those devices for inspections. And importantly, how to maintain and operate those grease control devices. We talked about this in the workshop a couple weeks ago. There's the 25% rule where they can't operate the grease trap when it's more than 25% full. There's an extensive section on how to clean the grease traps, and also how to keep records of your grease trap maintenance and cleaning. Also in Article 3, we provide for unique situations that may require a different approach, an exception to the grease trap requirements, perhaps a waiver to pretreatment requirements, but those exceptions would have to be approved by the Public Works Director. So moving on to Article 4. Talks about the inspections and the compliance. The Article 4 formalizes the city's right to enter to the facilities and conduct our inspections. It formalizes the city's right to access records of operation and maintenance of the grease control devices. Article 4 also lays out the measure for compliance for the discharging facilities. The measure of compliance being that they're implementing and documenting their best management practices for FOG management. They're performing and documenting their grease control device cleaning at the required frequency for the 25% rule. And if they're doing those things, the grease dischargers are considered in compliance with our ordinance. Now, if there is a non-compliant situation, the dischargers will get a couple of notifications, written notifications, to correct the non-compliant violation. And if the violation isn't corrected within the specified time frame, then the violation goes to code enforcement, through Title IV of the Municipal Code. Article 5 of the ordinance looks at remedial repair and abatement. This is a provision for cost recovery. If a discharger is found to be responsible for a sanitary sewer overflow, this article provides a mechanism for the city to recover costs of abatement. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of the ordinance, and now we look at Article 6, which describes how we administer these regulations. There's a lot of sections to this article. Quite a bit of it talks about the waste discharge permit that we're proposing to distribute to the applicants. Let's go through these sections quickly, starting with the general provisions and the fees. So for Article 6, the general provision is basically that the city's fog control program will administer the requirements of the ordinance. So right now we have one fee for the inspections. It's a $55 fee in our master fee schedule. But the City Council can look at those fees as a part of the master fee schedule update and choose how you would like to administer your ability for the fees. So the ordinance provides for several options. So the ordinance provides, should the City Council decide to do so, the ordinance provides for an initial fog inspection fee. The ordinance provides for an annual renewal fee. And should the council decide to do so, the ordinance also applies that the follow-up inspections, if we have a non-compliant condition, a fee for those follow-up inspections. If we have to have 2 follow-up inspections, then there could be a fee for the second follow-up inspection as we try to bring the discharger into compliance. So the council has an option to set those fees when we go over the master fee schedule. So once we get the application, the fees, we're going to give the dischargers this fog waste discharge permit. Now it's a legally binding agreement between the discharger and the city. The city allows the discharger to use the city's sewer collection system as long as the discharger promises to comply with the terms, conditions, and criteria of this ordinance. So that permit is going to be renewed annually. And in the permit, there's a lot of fine print, and the fine print is going to be read by the applicant, and the applicant will sign that they understand all of the requirements of the ordinance and that they agree to comply. So there might be some case-by-case exceptions to the typical permitting. The Public Works Director is provided the authority through this ordinance to examine on a case-by-case basis the fog permitting. The fog permit is non-transferable, so if you get a permit for your restaurant and you move to another location, you're going to have to reapply. If you sell your restaurant and there's a new owner, the new owner will need to reapply for a fog waste discharge permit. A few more requirements in the administration section. The dischargers will have to provide a site map of their kitchen. They need to keep some records of their maintenance and operations. And they need to monitor their operations in sort of a self-monitoring way through the year to ensure that they comply with the conditions of the ordinance. If a waste discharger, if they have an equipment breakdown, if something happens to their grease interceptor device, we require the discharger to contact the city if they're about to release a slug of fog, so that the city might be able to clean that section if needed. And lastly, with the administration of the program, we have this, to ensure that the program is successful, there's a statement that requires that all of the documents that the discharger provides to the city, there's no false statements, that their records are not falsified or altered, that all the documents that they submit to the city are true and correct. So that kind of is the summary of the ordinance. There's going to be some next steps. The staff is going to continue our public outreach and education. We're going to continue to update the website. If the council approves the ordinance tonight, a second reading would be placed on the agenda. Typically, it's the next council meeting, which would be November 7th. Then if we do have that second reading and we do approve the ordinance, then we'll go into the implementation phase. The city will continue, staff will continue to support our businesses as we implement the terms of the ordinance.
Thank you. That was a very, very complete and exhaustive.
Yes, I agree.
Report. Thank you. SSOs, sanitary sewer overflows, are a danger. They're a danger to the city. They're a danger to our environment. And they happen in large part because of noncompliance. One of the ways that people don't comply is by flushing fats, oils, grease, and sand into our sewer system. So this ordinance is extremely important, and I do appreciate the thoroughness of your report. That concludes the first reading of this ordinance, and we will now open the public hearing. Does anyone in the public have any comments? If not, I'll return to council and ask council.
I do have.
You have one on Zoom. Thank you.
Mike Ferreira.
Good evening, Mayor Penrose. I used to be in the restaurant business, so I'm just coming at this from a late comer to this issue and a little bit of puzzlement. A lot of what you are looking to do here would be particularly protective of overflows and the SAM function. And I'm sort of wondering how the mid-coast would address this very same problem, since they're actually, and they have more people and a lot of restaurants. I'm also a little puzzled because when I was in the restaurant business, I always thought the county was handling all of this. But just please excuse my puzzlement. I probably missed the explanation as to how the city ended up doing this role. Was it, I guess I'll ask the question, did the county just say we're not interested, or is Sam not capable, or
So,
that's all? Sorry.
didn't mean to cut you off. I can take a stab at that. So, so this ordinance is just for the city's sewer collection system. We are the authority of jurisdictional authority for our own pipes and structures that we own. We own the collection system from Frenchman's Creek south to the city boundary. And so the responsibility for our collection system is in the city purview. It seems like your question has more to do with areas outside of the city limits.
Thank you for the speaker. That's a great question, and I did confirm that there are, although it's not an ordinance, there are policies in the county health with regards to wastewater discharge that are very similar. We can talk to our counterparts in the other collection systems to see about their desires. We're happy to share this information. We have been talking to Granada and Montara about our program and our ordinance, so we were happy to share that with the others. But the county of San Mateo does have ordinance or some language as part of their health code with respect to wastewater discharge. So there are things out there, and what we're proposing here tonight for the city is pretty standard language as far as managing fat, oils, grease, and sand.
Perhaps Tim Costello could speak to what the Mid-Coast.
Mayor Penrose, if I could just ask Mike if he has any further comments, and we do have one
Sure.
more public commenter. Mike, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Thank you for responding, and I think I know a little more than I did before. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kimberly Williams.
Hi, this is Kimberly. Just wanted to piggyback on what Mike said. On the Mid-Coast, the unincorporated areas, I know. Can you hear me?
You're cutting out a little bit.
Oh, sorry. I have a bad connection, I think. I was just going to say, just to piggyback on what Mike said, that Surfrider has worked with the RCD and the Harbor District on issues in and around the harbor and some of the areas where restaurants wash out their grease pits. So this is a problem. And so far, we haven't seen much county enforcement. So I'm actually happy to see Half Moon Bay take the lead in some respects on this and to raise the issue so that maybe we can raise it further for the unincorporated areas to get some traction on the issue there. So thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. Is that it for public speakers?
No other public speakers.
Thank you. I would like to ask Tim if he has any idea what is going on in the Mid-Coast in terms of ordinances or regulations or working with the county to enforce reasonable codes. Tim is the guy at our sewer authority, Mid-Coast. What is your title, Tim? Chief of Operations or?
I'm the superintendent of the treatment facility.
Right, thank you.
So I wasn't really prepared to speak on anything about this, obviously, but so the ordinance that you guys have put forward, I can appreciate that ordinance. I really like it because we used to have, when we had more staff and we actually had people going out and doing the fog inspections and everything, it was a more robust system. And we had a bunch of staffing reduction, about the time the lawsuits and everything from Beechwood way back then. You guys are familiar with that, I know. So currently it's voluntary compliance, I believe, is kind of what it is that they do in the other districts, is what you would call it. Am I a fan of that? No, I don't think voluntary compliance works. That's my personal opinion. So what you guys are doing, I think, is probably much more much more robust and makes much more sense, because voluntary compliance, and it's not just my opinion. It's actually, I've talked to other people at other agencies, and they're like, yeah, no, that's not going to work. So.
Great, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I think that answers the question. Council, questions or comments?
Actually, I do have a comment, and maybe followed by a question. I think this is a topic that's important enough for the community actually to know about. Has there been any outreach about our community, about the, the use of fats and oils and going into our sewer? I know in the past I've seen the Pumpkin Festival, yes, past, but they used to show what happens when you wash grease and fats, into your drain, how it moves. So, but I think this topic is worth enough to actually provide education for our community. And I didn't see any of that in the ordinance. We're dealing with restaurants, or other service industries, hotels. But, I think our community also need to be part of this, educating, how that affects or sewer system, when this is done. Is there anything that actually is being done about the outreach for the community on this?
I'm happy to respond. That was a comment we heard at the last at the workshop, and we certainly are looking at putting some more information out. I know that Sam has done quite a bit of outreach through media. My 9-year-old actually reminded me about Sam's open house because that's publicized in a YouTube channel that he's been watching. So we certainly will work with Sam, and I totally agree. Beyond just restaurants and businesses, I think it's very helpful to have that type of information for the general public, because it will help us overall, even if a residential unit is not required to be a participant. I think there are a lot of good housekeeping information that we will be starting to roll out and share with the community.
Yeah, one of the things that I learned
Actually,
recently.
follow.
Sorry. Continue.
Yes, sorry. When this is offered to the community, make sure, you address that in multiple languages, to do so. I know the Republic, services, they do the compost, bins. So maybe working with them, to actually provide education in a way of, discharging, fats and oils from our homes into a separate container other than the regular garbage can. Maybe working with with recycling groups to be able to do this. Thank you. Sorry.
Councilmember Brownstone. Reddick?
I'm ready to make a motion.
Councilmember Rarbach, I just wanted to say that one of the things that came as a suggestion recently, and I can't remember who it was that made it, at home, if I cook something in olive oil, and I do lots of cooking in olive oil, I need to wipe with a paper towel the olive oil off of my plate before I put it in the dishwasher, because what goes into the dishwasher is going to be going into our sewers. I need to wipe it off out of the pan before I wash it in the sink, because that's going into the sewer system. So simple things like that. And luckily we have composting here, and composting can take paper towels as well as fats, oils, and grease. So it was a good thing for me to learn. I had not thought about it. I thought about pouring things into a coffee can and saving it and putting it in the refrigerator and all that, but just wiping things out makes sense.
I went out and bought a strainer at the hardware store after our workshop, and I was, totally surprised at how much stuff it's collecting. I thought I was doing a good job, scraping plates in the compost thing, but no, it's full like many times a day, so thanks for the tip.
I think do we close the public hearing before we take the vote? I will entertain a motion.
I move that we introduce on first reading an ordinance amending Title 13, Water and Sewer of the Half Moon Bay Municipal Code by adopting a new Chapter 13.22 entitled Fats, Oil, Grease, and Sand.
I second.
I have a roll call, please.
Try. Councilmember Brownstone?
Yes.
Councilmember Rohrbach?
Yes.
Councilmember Reddick?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Jimenez?
Yes.
Mayor Penrose?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, and thank you for a wonderful presentation. We now move on to a workshop on e-bikes and other electric devices on trails and paths.
Robert would like a 5-minute break.
Before we do that, I think council might want to take a 5-minute break. Is that okay? Thanks. Workshop on e-bikes and other electric devices on trails and paths, presented by our Public Works Director and City Engineer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the public, council. Masbo Zerghini again, Public Works Director, City Engineer, and I'm here with Matt Nichols, our Public Works Management Analyst, who's going to be giving us our presentation for tonight.
Thank you very much. Before I get started, I'm just going to give the city a shameless plug. After talking about compost, I'd love to invite our community to join us on Saturday, October 28th at Smithfield from 9 to 5 for our Community Recycling Day, where you can get some of that great compost. That would be Saturday, October 28th from 9 to 5 at Smithfield.
And that's for electronic devices as well, right?
Mm-hmm. E-waste, paper shredding, and compost.
Great.
I'm sorry, you said
9 to 12. Yeah. All right. Thank you again, Madam Mayor, members of the council, and the public. My name is Matt Nichols. I am the Public Works and Sustainability Management Analyst, and tonight I'll be giving a presentation for our workshop on e-bikes and other electric devices on trails and paths. So staff's recommendation is to give an informational update on the operation of e-bikes and other electric devices in regards to AB 1909, as well as get comments and feedback from council for the preparation of a draft ordinance on city-owned paths and trails. Before I get started, I just want to do a quick recap of the different classes of electric bike. So these are the three classes that count as a subcategory of bicycles, and these are not motorized vehicles. So you have your class 1s, which are the pedal assist with a top speed of 20 miles an hour. The class 2 is throttle assist with a top speed of 20 miles an hour. And your class 3s are pedal assist with a top speed of 28 miles an hour. There's also the term electric mountain bike, or e-mountain bike, is used quite often, and those tend to be class 1 e-bikes. The last time we brought this topic up to council, we were talking about all sorts of electric devices along the East Side Parallel Trail, Numi Patridge Trail, and the city-owned section of the Coastal Trail. This evening's focus will just be on those class 1 through 3 e-bikes due to some recent state legislation that affected council's previous recommendation to staff. Since that last workshop, we've had a lot of progress. We've been talking a lot with state parks at the district and local level, about all sorts of things, including their policy regarding e-bikes and matching other jurisdictions. We've also reached out to other jurisdictions about enforcement of their policies, what their policies look like. We received legal counsel on the implications of AB 1909 and possible legal pathways. We created a webpage for community members to stay engaged and give feedback to us as we start to work on this policy. And we've been exploring alternative enforcement options through leveraging jurisdictional relationships. In order to really understand AB 1909, we first need to go back to AB 1096. This was the bill that passed in 2016 that reclassified those e-bikes as from motorized vehicles to a subcategory of bicycle. But also what this bill did was it gave local jurisdictions the opportunity and option to either permit or prohibit these devices on various paths and trails. However, at the end of 2022, AB 1909 passed and went into effect beginning 2023. AB 1909 was an omnibus, so there was a lot of other bicycle-related legislation in this, and it caught a lot of cities by surprise. We didn't really expect or see this coming, but we weren't the only ones. It's pretty clever what it did. It removed just a few words, and in doing so, completely changed how jurisdictions can regulate and permit these devices. And what I mean by that is it took out language that had previously allowed jurisdictions to prohibit class 1 through 3 e-bikes on bicycle serving trails and paths. One other thing worth noting is that there is also an exception for California state parks so that they can still prohibit these devices if they so choose on their trails. So because of AB 1909 and its implications, staff has had to reevaluate and think of new ways to create a safe and welcoming trail network, especially with our coastal trail. At the last presentation, we heard a lot of public comment about people not feeling safe and wanting to have the coastal trail being a safe and welcoming place, and that's something that we took very seriously, and we still do take to heart. We want everyone to feel safe and welcome on our trails. So in looking into this, one of the things that we kind of thought of was speed limits. A lot of jurisdictions have speed limits on their trails. If you look at this map, you can see that county parks and state parks both have a maximum speed limit of 15 miles an hour on their trails, but it's more than that too. A lot of jurisdictions, while they may have that 15 mile an hour upper speed limit for not just e-bikes, by the way, but all sorts of devices, they also have lower speed limits depending on various criteria. So for instance, county parks drops their speed limit down to 5 miles an hour when entering and exiting trailheads, and state parks drops their speed limit down to 8 miles an hour when you're going through the campsite area. We feel that something similar might work very well for the city of Half Moon Bay along our section of the coastal trail. The idea of having people slow down to a lower speed when exiting and entering the trail could be very good for us, as well as potentially looking at doing something similar around the parking lot and exits and like the stairways to the beach. Another option that we were looking at potentially using was something like share the trail signage, having some kind of an educational component, some kind of public outreach, so that we can engage with our community and visitors to our beautiful town so that people know what the rules are here. Other options could be something like Share the Trail Days, where we have staff and maybe nonprofits or bike shops on the trails during peak season, tabling and educating people so that we can create a safer environment. So that was our informational update on e-bikes and AB 1909, and now we would love to hear comments and feedback from the City Council. Thank you.
Shall we listen to public forum first? We have two people here. First is Chad Hooker, followed by David Jerome.
Good evening. I think those of you on council know what my sentiment is about prohibition of e-bikes on the trail. I've made that pretty clear in some vociferous remarks in the past. I just want to encourage you to dovetail your ordinance about this with the state parks ordinance to make it as easy to ride the Coastside Trail as is feasible. And obviously, I'm in favor of lifting any idea about a prohibition on city trails. I think the Coastside Trail is a beautiful asset here on the coast, and I applaud those who were instrumental in having it built over these many years. And I would encourage that it be well maintained and improved and widened, but not that people be prohibited from it. I would also point out again that enforcement of a prohibition is a somewhat different sense for the public than enforcement of a speed limit. People understand regulations, people resent prohibitions, and I don't think any of us should be prohibited from being on that trail. I would repeat to you that e-bikes are to bicycles what pickleball is to tennis. It's something that older people can and should and do, so it shouldn't be prohibited for any of us. Thanks for your attention.
Is David Jerome in the audience?
Good evening. I just wanted to put a public face to another e-bike rider. So I was a regular bicycle rider until my knees gave out, and now I ride an e-bike because that's what I can do. I take great pleasure in riding on the coastal trail, do so every week, several times a week, and I'd like to continue doing so. I saw the idea of prohibiting excessive speed on the trail as a good step. I think that applies to e-bikes, regular bikes, any other kind of any kind of two-wheeled vehicle. So anyway, that's I just wanted to say that I'd like to continue to ride my bike. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Do we have Zoom public speakers? No, she pulled out. She pulled it? Yeah, she didn't want to.
Mike Ferreira.
Good evening, Mayor Penrose and council members. From the meeting in, I think it was April, late April, my takeaway was that the council was concerned about the near impossibility of enforcing speed limits, especially through areas like Wavecrest, which of course don't have police patrols. If you're going to go to speed limits, there needs to be some consideration of how they can be enforced. I think that speed limits, no matter what vehicle you're driving anywhere, are not an honor system kind of thing. And so I can't solve that, but perhaps you can look to staff to try to find some proposals to you, concrete proposals as to how speed limits actually could be enforced. There always has been a conflict between bikes and pedestrians, and it's exacerbated with the growing popularity of e-bikes. You know, AB 1909 is a hot mess, poorly written. It could be interpreted in different ways. One thing that's in there, though, is that perhaps the city still has authority over unpaved trails. And if, from a long-range perspective, perhaps there should be some discussion of a parallel unpaved trail that pedestrians might find refuge in. Coast Walk and a lot of other people have advocated for unpaved coastal trails for many years. With all of that. I would just say that I fully appreciate that the council's main concern was public safety, and I would ask that you please try to hang on to that a bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Kimberly Williams.
Hi, this is Kimberly again for San Mateo County Chapter of Surf Rider. I just want to remind you primarily that the coastal trail has a specific purpose, and it is to allow everyone to access and enjoy the coast, to enjoy the bluffs and the beach and see the ocean. And while I'm sympathetic to bike riders, I also ride a mountain bike, and I periodically ride from Moss Beach to Half Moon Bay on the coastal trail. I think it's very important, that we preserve the coastal trail primarily for everyone to access, not just as a thoroughfare for bikes. And I agree with Mike that an unpaved trail is desirable. I definitely appreciate those more than a paved trail. But we're talking about the coastal trail. It is what it is, and that it is its purpose. And I'm very concerned that it's becoming more of a commuting road than anything else. And it is driving people off of the trail because they're afraid of being run over by bikes, and not just e-bikes, bikes that are going at high speeds. People doing fast workouts or trying to get somewhere quickly. So these are hard things to deal with, and I agree that enforcement is difficult, and you should think very carefully about how you will enforce the rules. So thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly.
I have no other speakers, Mayor.
Thank you. I bring it back to council for questions and comments. Councilmember Brownstone.
Yeah, I think back in April, so we decided to ban all e-bikes, even though at that point the state was going to allow type 1 and type 2, right? And then we had some conversations about being inconsistent, trails and making the difficulty of that enforcement. So I think, and also, I really do wonder about our designation. I realize this differentiating between a recreational trail and a bike path. We've always called it a coastal trail, which I think predominantly was for walking with bikes and people with their dogs. Frankly, I see a paved bike path would usually have a line down the middle if it wants to be like an official. But I realize after talking to council, there's been some different interpretations, but I think that'll be a continuing interpretation. I feel I'd be mostly in favor. Now, the state is only allowing type 1. And where I stand, I think we should just right now stay consistent with the state and allow for type 1. A little bit of a compromise, but allow for type 1. And I think the real heavy lifting will be is really more around enforcement of speed limits. And I think the state might cooperate with this. And I would instruct staff. I think they've already been doing some research on some ways to actually enforce speed limits. And I think the state parks folks would probably cooperate with us if we come up with some good processes for that. And so yeah, being that right now the law's changed, I would say we could maybe land on just going with type 1s and be consistent, so at least it's the same regulation for the entire length of the path. Thanks.
Councilmember Barbach.
In April, I was very impressed with the unanimous decision that this council had concerned with safety, that we would ban e-bikes on the coastal trail, not the Naomi Patridge Trail. I still think that's a good idea. Unfortunately, after talking to our city attorney, it really seems that AB 1909 would not allow us to do that, which I think is a shame, but the way it is now, if we're interested in safety, I certainly think a speed limit, 15 miles an hour, plus the conditions that Matt just talked about, would be the best way to assure safety. So I'm not thrilled that we have to do that, but I think we have no option at this point. Thank you.
Vice Mayor. Councilmember Ruddock.
So I agree with the attorney's assessment about the legislation. And I've spent 15 years of my professional career reading and analyzing legislation for the state of California. So I went back and I looked at the committee analyses of the bill, and it became pretty clear to me, looking at both the Assembly and Senate committee analyses, as well as the floor analyses, that the city attorney's assessment is correct. In fact, the Senate analysis talks about classes of bike paths, and it says, generally, Class 1 bike paths should serve corridors not served by streets and highways or where wide right-of-way exists, permitting such facilities to be constructed away from the influence of parallel streets. Bike paths should offer opportunities not provided by the road system. They can either provide a recreational opportunity, in some instances can serve as direct high-speed commute routes if cross-flow by motor vehicles and pedestrian conflicts can be minimized. The most common applications are along rivers, ocean fronts, canals, utility right-of-way, abandoned railroad right-of-way, within school campuses, and within and between parks. And basically the law says if it's a Class 1 bikeway, you have to allow the full range of e-bikes, except it looks like there might be some flexibility with Class 3 bikes. And what I'd like to do is, have staff and our city attorney look more carefully at the Class 3. I don't like the idea of Class 3. Class 1 and 2 both, while the 2 has a throttle, they're both about 20 miles per hour, and they're already out there. People are using the coastal trail with both Class 1 and Class 2 bikes. I occasionally see a Class 3. I'd like to see that eliminated if possible. So I'd like staff to, just dig in about, a little more on where we have some flexibility there. But, for me, I think we have to get people out of their cars. We're going to be talking next about our climate adaptation plan. How do we get people out of their cars? How do we reduce greenhouse gas emissions from vehicles? As far as I'm concerned, the more we can, reduce the use of single occupancy vehicles in this town, whether it's parking on Main Street or whatever, the better. I don't like cars. And they're parked all over the neighborhoods. They create safety problems, whether they're moving or not moving. I'm done with cars. So I'd like to see us become more of a bike-friendly community. And I think, spending some resources on education, maybe having, some citizen ambassadors who are retired and like to ride their bikes, maybe, get out there on the trail and help instruct people. But I don't, I think that the horse is out of the barn, and I don't think we're gonna, get a real handle on that. So I think we have to work on safety and education, and I'm happy to support that. But I think the idea that we can prohibit Class 2 bikes, Class 1 bikes, I think it's too late for that. And I do support restricting them on unpaved trails. I think we gave that direction previously, and I think we should continue that for sure. The other benefit of having, paved trails, of course, is making them ADA accessible for people who are physically challenged, and the elderly. They want to ride their bikes. I'm totally in favor of that. And wheelchairs or, what have you. I've seen all manner of electric, gizmos out there on the trail, and I think we want to support it. And I understand the need for, quiet, low-impact recreation, I think we want to have that too. I like the idea of parallel unpaved trail, if we can find a way to do that, financially, feasibly. But I'm in favor of proceeding with, implementing AB 1909 to the best of our ability, but looking at restricting Class 3. So that's where I'm kind of down.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Jimenez.
Thank you. It's difficult to make decisions like this because, that's what, Councilmember Redick, talked about. We want to promote, bicycle use in our community, and e-bikes are here. But also, that concern for safety of our older population or seniors, having access to the trails. And I know we are talking about, Poplar to Kelly, just a stretch. But that's where I see most of the activity happening, the walks. And it's difficult to actually identify between a class 1, 2, and 3 if you don't know about e-bikes. There's other ones that look like like a motorcycle, but I don't know what class they are because those things fly. Picking up speeds over 20 miles per hour, that's pretty fast on a trail. I do ride my bike on the trail, mornings mostly, and I see other cyclists actually on the trail with bicycles that don't belong on those trails. They're flying. So my concern is how we're going to be able to, to manage speeds. Are we going to be enforcing? We're going to have somebody out there. Education alone, is difficult. I've seen it happen, where somebody's riding a street bike, pretty fast on the trails, and they get upset when the person that's walking takes too long to move out of the way, right? So that's, if you're riding that fast, you should be on the highway. If you want to go fast, you need to be on the highway. And that's, class 3, if you're picking up 28 miles per hour speed limits, you should be on the highway, not on the coast trail where you're actually enjoying, the morning fresh air or the view of the ocean or everything that it has to offer on the coastal trail. I don't want to say yes, but I don't want to say no, but maybe we can actually give it a try, maybe pilot this, during the peak season of on the trails, see what happens. I would love to see some citations, or even if, riding your bicycle too fast, even if it's not an e-bike, but you have a speed of 50 miles per hour on a coastal trail, especially some of the blind spots that we have, is dangerous. People walking their dogs, with their children on a stroller, families, walking, and you're picking up those speeds. E-bike or no e-bike is dangerous. So no, my thing is about enforcing that. Like I say, I'm up for it. To give them an opportunity, to give us an opportunity to have them on the trail. But just like we are enforcing, off-leash dogs and other things on the beach, how are we going to be able to enforce that? That's my concern, the safety. It only takes one person to be run over by an e-bike, an older person, on a walker. That's my main concern. Or children, children don't think. If you walk your child down the trail, You cannot keep them on a leash like you do with your dog, you know. So that's the other concern. So speed limits, 15 is too fast. Even for just a regular bike, it's too fast. If I'm gonna be going, when I like to go fast on the coast, I'll take highway, Highway 1. So let's try it out first. You know, let's make it a pilot. You know, like and see what comes out of that. If you know people are respecting the speed limits, there's no citations. Why not? Let's get the e-bikes on the trails.
I have great sympathy for the 2 e-bike riders that spoke tonight. I understand what it is to get old and have bad knees and find it difficult to ride a bicycle. Because of bad balance, had to give up bike riding a few years ago. But I'm not going to be any better on a e-bike than I was on a regular bike, and I think that's true for a lot of older people. But I also have great sympathy for elderly people who can't ride e-bikes, like myself, who want to walk on the coastal trail, and my hearing is not so great. And I don't hear people coming up behind me on the trail in time. Some of them don't even say on your left or someone's behind you or ring a bell. I've seen near accidents. I've seen them in town as well as on the coastal trail. So I have no real interest in seeing e-bikes of any kind on the coastal trail. However, I don't think I can do anything about it. I think the state has made it clear that we can't outlaw them without going against the state, and I'm not ready to put the city in that sort of a position where we are fighting the state on this issue. I don't think we can afford it. If we had the money, I'd do it, but that's another story. In terms of parallel trails, we have parallel trails. There is the highway parallel trail. There's the East Side parallel trail. There's the Naomi Patridge trail. There are plenty of trails for e-bike users to use. So the difficulty comes when you say, well, you're depriving me of the beauty of the coastal trail. And what I say to you then is, ride your e-bike on the Naomi Patridge trail, get off, and then walk over to the coastal trail and spend a little time enjoying the coastal trail, because that's what it's for. It's for enjoying the ocean. It's for enjoying being in a beautiful coastal bluff with natural vegetation, with wildflowers, with other people that are doing the same sort of thing. In terms of getting people out of their cars, I'm all for that too, but not on my coastal trail. So when I first read the agenda and read the staff report on this, I called the attorney for the committee for transportation for the state that Laura Friedman, the author of this bill, heads, and asked him to please explain to me what's the difference between a recreational trail and the coastal trail. And he said, well, I agree with you. This is a poorly written law. It is very difficult to interpret, but the way we have to interpret it is that the law was written to amend a law which allowed e-bikes. So because that was the purpose of the law, then you have to believe that the language is written for that reason. So we're stuck. I'm stuck. You may not be stuck. I'm stuck. I think that's all I have to say. I think I've covered most of what it's not just public safety. It's the ability of somebody like myself to be able to walk next to the ocean without having to guard myself against what's happening behind me and what could possibly hurt me or kill me. or maim me, because I'm old and I'm not strong the way I used to be. And it's not just me, it's the little kids who don't have any sense at all of the danger out there. And we don't want to be telling our kids, now, you can walk on the coastal trail, but you must be looking behind you at all times. The ocean is not there for you to look at. You have to look behind you because a bike could be coming, electric or otherwise. I'm not blaming. And then the last thing I think I want to say is e-bikes. All you have to do is clip a wire and you can go 70 miles an hour on some of these e-bikes. It's a simple wire you clip. And in terms of enforcement, yes, that's where we're stuck. We're stuck right now with a bill that has been passed that I think is going to really do harm to our city. But I do believe that staff is working as hard as they can to figure out how can we enforce safe laws and safe practices on the coastal trail. And I know that they will come up with solutions that will work for us. So I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful for the work that our city attorney has done in investigating the law and trying to figure out what the heck it means. She had as much trouble or more trouble than I did, maybe. So that's where I'm coming from, and that's all I have to say. Yeah.
You know, the rest of the world is so far ahead of us, you know, on bike transportation. You know, cities of 15 million people, you know, people mostly get around with bikes and foot. They've managed to do it, you know, forever. So, you know, we need to get with a program in terms of adopting a culture that respects, you know, users on multi-purpose trails. And that takes education and it takes some enforcement, but, you know, I think that's, you know, where we're headed in you know, in a climate changing world. So let's just join everybody else and learn how to do it right.
Councilmember Brownstone.
Yeah, I'd like to make a couple of extra comments. So, you know, cities, if you're concerned about getting less people in cars, which I agree with, and I've traveled quite a bit around the world and seen a lot of cities in this country, yeah, that requires, you know, really good bike lanes. You know, we've all seen terrific bike lanes in city, you know, go up to Davis. So it's set up for that. I agree with the mayor that our coastal trail it's not really set up for that. We have the parallel trails. If you want to use, you know, be commuting, you know, that's why we have parallel trails. But we do not have bike lanes set up for commuting. So trying to convert, you know, the coastal trail to serve that purpose, to me, is putting a square peg in a round hole. And also you said, you know, it's out of the box. You can't put it back in the box. Well, frankly, the city of Paris totally has banned e-bikes completely after years of having them because of all the accidents. So yeah, it can be put back in the box. And the way it's set up now, you know, it barely make a dent in car driving because we don't really have great bike lanes. That's what we need. This isn't a substitute. And, you know, speaking of mandates, I agree what you're talking about walking. I walk the trail all the time. I can't hear bikes approaching to the last second. Plenty of people don't even say on your left. And I think we should make mandatory that you at least have a bell on your bike. I mean, they are so cheap. You know, little domed ones with that little hammer, they're like a Tibetan bell. It cuts right through I mean, you can hear that a quarter of a mile away. I hit that a couple of times. All the pedestrians pay attention. You know, it's terrific. And, yeah, once in a while we have an enforcement day. And people, you know, if you don't have a bell, get off the darn trail. We can find probably a grant to pay for bells. You know, you buy a bike, you get a free bell in the city, whatever. Yeah. But it's such a simple solution to avoid a significant percentage of accidents. and it's good for the cyclers, and it's good for the pedestrians. So, okay, that's it. And I know staff's probably dying to tell us about some of the enforcement things they're thinking about in terms of speed control. So.
Okay, I think that closes council's comments, and I appreciate the presentation. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, can I just maybe just feedback a little bit, make sure that staff
Please.
has gotten the direction? So what I've heard is, although we're backing away from an absolute ban on e-bikes on the coastal trail, we've heard some direction, which I think is reiterated from previous conversations, that still unpaved trails need to be banned of all e-bikes. And we should continue to explore ways to ban at least Class 3 bikes if that is a possibility. And then the focus really shifts to a speed limit. I've heard 15 miles an hour from several people, but I know Councilmember or Vice Mayor Jimenez feels like that is too fast, so I think there's some research we need to do on that. Consistency with the other agencies is an issue. Madam Mayor?
I forgot, I did want to mention that. State parks, in their campgrounds, where they have the most foot traffic, have limited speed limits to 8 miles an hour. And that's what I think we ought to be aiming for, is 8 miles an hour.
Okay. So we'll explore. Yeah. So we'll have to explore that. And along with that comes education, signage. I am going to ask a question of all of you in relation to this. We've seen advertisements and availability for those flashing speed signs, which I'm not sure visually are really compatible with the coastal trail, but I wonder if maybe portable versions of that on an occasion or during a ramp-up period is something we'd have a little bit of tolerance for. I think those can be effective, and we're not sure how much they cost and if we can afford it, but as an option, it sounds like there's some tolerance for that. We could talk about that when we bring the ordinance back. And then, of course, as has been mentioned in previous discussions and tonight, enforcement is a big issue. There are ordinances we pass and we're complaint-based. This is not one of those. That doesn't work. In order for us to have an effective speed limit, we have to be able to enforce it. And so, as you mentioned, and we've shared with you, staff is actively pursuing some options and some funding to help with that enforcement. I think that's crucial. So I would ask that we wait to bring this back, at least for a final ordinance and adoption, until we've worked that out and can build that into it. And it's a top priority for us. We hope to have it resolved within a few weeks. So Moz and Matt, I don't know if there were other things that you heard that you think need to be addressed. And then Moz, you might talk a little bit about the Poplar Gateways plan as well.
Thank you, Matthew. Yeah, I'll add a little bit on that, and Matt can join in if there's anything else I've missed. There are certainly a number of projects underway in different phases. I think building out our networks for the bike facilities is important. It's something that the council's prioritized in the past and continues to do so through our capital improvement program. We heard a little bit about one of the items on consent was about the segment 4 on the north side. We obviously have some funding for some of the other portions, like the crossing of Frenchman's Creek on the east side, that we're starting to look at, starting design and environmental. We're also seeking grant funding to look at the southern corridor south of the downtown to our city limits on the south side. So it's definitely something that's on our minds. We also have the Poplar Gateways project that has been ongoing. It's been stalled a little bit due to budgetary constraints and staff timing, but again, there's all options and alternatives there for multiple types of paths, maybe a DG path for other users. So there's definitely opportunities out there, and I think that's where we have to continue looking at. The other thing I want to mention is that there are options. I know we showed one of the signs posted on a post, but we can also do those on A-frames and put them more ground mounted and do different things where, again, it brings attention to the rules of the road without blocking and providing that visual impairment for the scene. So I think there's quite a bit of things we can do and a lot of research that we've done and will continue to do so, as well as costs for some of those different elements. I know there's some speed radar feedback signs that are housed in what looks like a larger stone. I've seen things like that. So there's technology out there that we can really look at and see what makes the most sense and, is it cost effective, and see what we can implement. So thank you for the feedback. I think it's really great. We'll take all of that information and hope to come back soon.
Yeah, and I think go ahead, Matt. Please.
Just to add on to that also, I think public outreach and education is going to be a big part of that. That's something that I personally love to do, is get out in the public, talk with residents, and the idea of something like being out on the trail during the busy season to hand out bike bells, talk to people about how to enjoy our beautiful coastal trail, but in a safe and responsible way for all users is something that we would love to do, provide to our residents.
Great.
So will our Parks and Rec Commission and our Bikeways Committee get another bite at this and hear about?
Yes, my understanding is the process we had laid out was to come back for this direction from you. We will craft an ordinance, and it will start with our BPAC and Rec Commission, probably in a joint session, get their feedback, hone that in, and bring it back to you for either one more study session or just a first reading. And again, as soon as we have worked out the enforcement issue, we will move that forward quickly. I think with the weather changing and the seasons changing, that may take a little bit of the urgency away, but it'd be great to have all of this lined up and in place and the bugs worked out so that when we get to our next busy season, it's already just institutionalized here on the coast side. So I think that'd be our goal.
Vice Mayor Jimenez.
A couple things. I think that's a great idea about the flashers with the speed checks. Something we could try. Yes, so we can have an idea about how fast we are going when we are on our bicycles. And I think that's going to work for the regular bike and the e-bikes. Also, I know here in the coast, there's some of our local businesses, they do e-bike rentals, and some of the bicycles also offer some of the hotels. To be able to work with them, it would be a good idea to work with the Chamber of Commerce, who is here represented right here, to provide actually maps of the trails that we have, that also educates our visitors about the speed limits, and the responsibility that they have about riding a regular bicycle or an e-bike on our trails, and just educating our community. Because I do see, was a Half Moon Bay Lodge, south of Half Moon Bay, they offer bicycles, and I see them riding their bikes, on the side of the highway, and for us to be able to enforce that and to maintain, their safety, it is our responsibility. So the flashers, the speed checks, great idea. Also working with the local businesses to provide education on the trails and the speed limits that are going to be posted on different trails, and just about the safety, the safety of our community when we're riding our bicycles. Something to I would like to see, especially now or Main Street and Johnson Street, and maybe other streets. They have, signage, about bicycles in our community, and just to for the city to have that available, the newspaper, social media. So what are we doing to be more bicycle friendly? I see more children, more high school students, middle school students riding their bikes, to school, and they don't respect the stop signs but they're they're riding. Some of them are riding a little bit too fast. So we need to do something about that as well. So I would love to see that, to be part of what we're trying to do here in Half Moon Bay, the bicycle, promoting our bikes, e-bikes, and safety, our community.
Thank you. Anybody else on council have anything they want to add? Okay, do you have enough direction then?
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. We move on to item 3B. This is the format for our workshop. Do you have something else that you wanted to say, Chad? Please, please say it.
Just to stay in the concept of this general conversation here, a couple things to think about. The main thing I've heard from each of you in various formats is this concern about safety. The biggest problem with the Coastside Trail at this point in time is that it's too narrow for both bikes and pedestrians. Please notice I said bikes. I think this distinction between bikes and e-bikes should be discarded. The idea is that we want a trail system that allows for people to walk their dogs even when they're walking along talking on a cell phone and the dog is on one of those elastic wind-up things and the dog is off there smelling whatever dogs smell, and they're right across the bike trail and here the trail. That happens a lot. People aren't paying attention to controlling their dogs. I don't think you should have to control your kids, but I don't think it's reasonable to assume that pedestrians walking both north and south, dogs walking north and south, kids walking north and south, and bikes going north and south can all fit on a 10-foot trail. So if there's a genuine interest in getting people out of cars and on bikes, widen the trail. I know it costs some money, but this brings me to a question I have. I'm understanding from the maps I've seen that it's state parks that has jurisdiction from Kelly Street north, but who built that trail and who paid for it? Who's supposed to fix the fence north of the aluminum bridge that's now rotting and falling down? Is that state parks? Is that City Half Moon Bay? Who owns it? Does anybody know?
That's a great comment. No, that is state parks' responsibility. That's a portion that they own. I don't know if they are the ones that built it, but they are the ones that are responsible for maintaining that.
So when the bridge went out, it was state parks that put it back?
The bridge on the north side.
The bridge across Pillars Hills Creek, just north of the state.
No, that was something that the city did move forward with at that time, although it was a part of the state parks network.
Okay. There are numerous areas along that section of the trail. Now, I know we're talking about in the city limits, but outside of city jurisdiction. But I don't know who's responsible for all that maintenance. There are a lot of places there where the trail is 7 feet wide because of the encroaching vegetation on both sides. And it just makes it really difficult. It's not like the vegetation you can just sort of ride through and push out of the way. It's thorns and thistles and, it's gnarly. So the trail does need to be wider, and that would be a consideration for the city from Kelly, not just down to south of Poplar, but this next phase that I think it's Coastal Land Trust is planning to develop now. I'm on AAC, and that plan came before us, and it's the same thing. It's a 10-foot wide trail with a 1-foot shoulder. It should be a 16. If we're serious about having trails developed, you go through all the process of the environmental stuff, how to build a bridge, who's going to get a concrete truck out there to put a header in by a creek, how to do, DG compacting. I mean, all of that stuff takes so much preparation and money. To make it twice as wide makes sense to do at that time. When the coastal trail is maintained or upgraded in any way, it should be made wider, and that'll make it work for everybody. Whether the state can be persuaded to do that to the north, I don't know, but it's certainly food for thought. The permitting process, the financing process is so long for any of this stuff. It would be wise to think it through in one piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Chad. Vice Mayor Jimenez has a comment, and then Councilmember Ruddock.
I think that trail is wide enough, for pedestrians and bicycles. But it's responsibility of the bicycle to stop or slow down, when a dog is across the trail. it's a vehicle. A bicycle is a vehicle. So a pedestrian has a authority to move. So it is our responsibility, to slow down or stop, and then proceed when it's safe. So I just want to make sure that clear. I think the trail is wide enough, but we have to be responsible when we're on it.
Councilmember Reddick.
When you're talking about 12 or 16 feet, you're talking about a boardwalk. That's pretty much state standards for a boardwalk. My agency had funded boardwalks. And so when you're getting to 16 feet, that's what you're talking about. And, that's pretty heavy-duty infrastructure in a sensitive area. So probably better to do something that's unpaved, adjacent to what you have, rather than creating more runoff and more heavy infrastructure and et cetera. So I understand what you're saying, but I think it becomes a different animal.
Okay. We're going to be moving on to item 3B, our draft climate action and adaptation plan phase 1. And thank you, Matt, for the presentation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Moz again, I'm here with Veronica Vostenak for the Climate Action Adaptation Plan Phase 1 presentation.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, members of the public. I'm Veronica Vostenak, the Public Works and Sustainability Programs Manager, and I'm really happy to be here tonight to present for your comments and discussion the draft Climate Action and Adaptation Plan Phase 1. Phase 1 is focused more on climate action because of some budget and staffing issues. We decided to break the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan into 2 separate but complementary documents. So what we're talking about tonight is focused on climate action. And in the spirit of not assuming anybody is at the same level of understanding, I wanted to start with a little bit of information about what is a climate action plan. So before I get to that, I'll talk about what is the difference between action and adaptation. They're very related. There's a lot of things that can kind of live in the middle. I really like this image here from the city of Los Altos. Their CAP, Climate Action Adaptation Plan. Climate action is really focused on mitigation, so reducing the greenhouse gas emissions that contribute to increased climate change, which we see today with increased flooding and higher heat, drought, things like that, increased storms, air quality, wildfire. And then adaptation is looking at addressing those impacts that we're seeing now and expect to see it at an accelerated rate in the future. So for an example of an adaptation strategy might be looking at stormwater infrastructure or mitigating flooding. Where mitigation or climate action is looking at clean energy, moving to more sustainable transportation, or reducing our waste. Again, there's a lot of overlap here, which is why the documents will ultimately complement each other and form one master document. This whole plan is surrounded by the California state goals related to greenhouse gas emission reduction. We have AB 32 calling for a 20% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from 1990 levels by 2020. SB 32 looking at a 40% reduction by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2045. The state has really ambitious goals, some of the most ambitious goals in the country. So we have modeled our climate action plan goals on the state's goals as the state has called on the cities to help the state move forward towards these goals. What you can expect to see in the climate action plan, again, we don't want to assume that anybody has any prior knowledge, so there's quite a bit of scientific and regulatory context at the very beginning of the document. Then we have a greenhouse gas emissions inventory that categorizes where we see the greenhouse gas emissions coming from in the city, both at our baseline and looking forward to 2019. Then we have some emissions reduction strategies, so how can we reduce those emissions moving towards 2030 and 2045, and then ultimately some information about how we implement those strategies. We've done quite a bit of outreach for this plan. We started, believe it or not, with some of the outreach before even starting the plan development in 2019. We have done a lot of outreach that a lot of other cities have actually looked to us for advice on how to collaborate with community-based organizations, especially those focused on disadvantaged communities. We focused on the Latino community, older adults and youth when we were talking about our disadvantaged communities. But altogether, between fall of 2019 and fall of 2023, we've held over 30 events with over 1,000 participants and partnered with over 15 community partners. The community partners that we've worked with have been really fantastic, and I wish I could give them all the accolades right now, but there's all of their logos here, and they were all really imperative in helping us shape the plan even before we started. So next I'll go through our 2019 greenhouse gas emission inventory. The county of San Mateo does our inventories and all of the inventories throughout the county. And it takes quite a while to go through all of that data and get it, which is why we're working with 2019. That's the most up-to-date inventory that we have. So here I'll give you a little bit of context. All these greenhouse gas emissions are in the units of metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. To give some indication of what that might mean, 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide equivalent is comparable to over 2,000 miles of driving in a car. So altogether, in 2019, our emissions was the equivalent of a car driving 162 million miles. So, but I think it was, I looked it up, I think it's like 16 times around the earth. So quite a lot in our little city here. As you could imagine, our biggest contributor is transportation, specifically gas-powered vehicles. Then shortly, the next biggest emitter is natural gas use in buildings, followed by solid waste, building electricity, and a little bit of emissions associated with wastewater and water. You may be wondering how we're doing so far. Our baseline is starting at 2005, and we've reduced our emissions by about 25%. The main reason why we've seen this reduction is the formation of Peninsula Clean Energy and providing clean electricity to our buildings. So at the base level, they provide electricity from all clean sources, so both renewable and some hydropower and some other clean sources, geothermal. And then their higher tier provides all renewable electricity, so mainly from solar and wind. Because of that, we've reduced by about 25%, but there's quite a ways to go to get to that 40% by 2030. So I will, on the next couple slides, I'll do a really high-level overview of what actions are included in the plan. There's a lot more detail in the plan about how exactly we may achieve these. So for those who are interested, I encourage you to look at the plan. The draft's available on our website, and I believe there was a link in our staff report, but I'm also happy to speak to some of that if there's any questions. And the next couple slides, I'll be focusing more on how do we achieve that 2030 goal, since that's where this plan is really focused. It's looking at 2030 and then setting ourselves up for 2045, but most of the goals are focused on 2030, which is what I'll focus on for this presentation. So first, transportation. I have these little asterisks here. that show the more asterisks, the more greenhouse gas emission reduction potential. So we have three, switching away from gas-fired vehicles towards zero-emission vehicles, whether they be electric or plug-in hybrid or any other sort of technology that may exist now or in the future. That's going to have the biggest contribution to reduce greenhouse gas emissions for transportation. There's a couple things the city can do. We can encourage or install charging infrastructure, encourage some electric car share, but really do a lot of education and outreach to let people know about the incentives and some of the benefits, and maybe even do a little bit of myth busting. Then a little bit less of an impact on our greenhouse gas emissions, but still an important strategy, is focused on moving away from single driver cars towards active transportation like biking or walking, maybe providing some opportunities for bike rentals, scooter rentals, and public transportation. We've been really happy about Samtrans micromobility pilot, but we're also working with the county on trying to look coast-wide at what opportunities we have to encourage or support public transportation. Then we have moving to electric landscaping equipment, looking towards getting shared transportation, carpooling and vanpooling, and increasing walkability. I also have some items here that don't have asterisks, and those we've included in the plan because we think they're important strategies, but we don't have a greenhouse gas emission reduction number associated with those in the plan. Next, we have building energy, mainly focused on natural gas use in buildings. I have the first point here in green, all electric new construction. It's green because the council adopted an ordinance requiring this in 2022. Then because we have new construction, we have a strategy there. Now we're looking at how do we electrify our existing buildings. So the plan outlines some ways that we can work towards electrifying 20% of existing residential buildings and 17% of existing commercial buildings by 2030. Then we have some district natural gas use. So that means any other government buildings in the city limits. Maybe that's the RCD, maybe that's the Sewer Authority Midcoast, maybe that's Coastside Water, working with them to reduce the natural gas usage for their offices as well. Then we have solid waste. So our biggest strategy here is related to SB 1383, which is a state law focused on getting organic material out of the landfill in various different ways. So organic material emits methane when it's in the landfill. So working towards those state goals, again, they're pretty ambitious, trying to ensure that organics are making their way to a composting facility, and also making sure that food that is still fit for human consumption is going to those who need it. So as long as we meet or exceed those requirements outlined by the state, including procuring some compost, we will be able to make the emissions reduction that we need in this sector. We also have some other measures related to recycling and reusable programs. The city's done a lot of really great work. The city council has approved some programming and ordinances related to this, and we wanted to make sure that that work continues and that we have it outlined in the climate action plan. And then we have some other measures. These are ones that are not as quantified, and they're focused on some of the smaller greenhouse gas emitters like water and wastewater. We want to try to do whatever we can to help our residents and businesses reduce their water consumption. We're looking at some carbon sequestration planning. We have a contract with the RCD to quantify what that might look like in some of our natural and working lands. So that's something that's in progress and really exciting. And then also increasing participation in green businesses. We've had some businesses show interest, but the process can be a little bit difficult and unwieldy, so really being available to support those who want to go through that process. Then, of course, because we have to put our money where our mouth is, we also have some municipal measures, making sure that our city operations are following the same sorts of programming that we would expect any other entities in the city to do. So we're working to electrify all of our municipal facilities. We have some work that's going on with that right now. Increasing zero-emission vehicle adoption. We have, at some point on our way, a Ford Lightning coming, which is really exciting. And, you know, as other vehicles get retired, ensuring that whatever is replaced with a zero-emission vehicle. Increasing our waste diversion, ensuring we're using reusables wherever possible, and training our employees to sort waste correctly, and leveraging grant funding to move forward all of the measures outlined in the action plan as well. So that is my presentation. I'm here for any questions or comments.
Thank you, Veronica.
Yeah.
Council.
There are admirable goals. That's wonderful. I think that one of the ways that we can really reach those goals is with education. When we tried to pass an ordinance about electrifying refits, remodels, there was a lot of pushback. And I was saddened by that because people just don't understand what the significance of reducing greenhouse gas emissions is. But I think encouraging EVs, having more charging stations, including in multifamily units, having EV demos where people can actually ride in an EV and see, you know, what it's all about. Also, with electrification, the same thing. This senior center recently hosted a pretty good meeting where people who had electrified their houses got to talk about the benefits. And Peninsula Clean Energy is a leader in trying to get rebates, financing, education, all of those things we have to encourage so that people are aware of what can be done and why it has to be done. So this is a good start, and I want to encourage it to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Vice Mayor Jimenez.
Thank you for the presentation. You know, really, really good. Good education. I just want to say that it's getting to be expensive to go green. You know, right now, you know, I'm all for it, but I also know that our community has been affected by it right now. You know, all the things, you know, housing, you know, and like, you know, Harvey, you know, mentioned, you know, even charging stations, you know, multi-family units. You know, we talked about it before, you know, we mentioned, you know, talked about that, but it is expensive. You know, families barely making it with a vehicle as a gas hustler, you know, and we need to find ways, you know, to actually work with these families to get them grants, you know, so they can actually, you know, not loans, you know, grants to actually invest in these vehicles, you know. Because, you know, I heard from somebody before that it is expensive to be poor, you know, and it is expensive to go green, you know, but I know we have to do it. We have to move our direction, but we have to think about what's happening right now in our community, you know, before we take any steps. I also like the idea, you know, that we're going to go the direction, the city. So any building that we own, you know, actually to do that. You know, I brought that up a while back, you know, when we talked about this, City Hall, let's put some solar panels on that thing. This building is big enough for a lot of panels, to go electrical. We have a beautiful kitchen, when it was remodeled, we need to work on that. So, but, finding ways of educating our community about what is what are we doing this, what is the purpose of this, and finding ways that can actually benefit them too, because it is expensive. I don't think I don't have a way to charge a vehicle and, or buy one or invest in one. I would love to do that, but I don't think I could afford it. So finding ways, educating our community, opportunities, that's something I would like to see, but really good presentation, though. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Reddick.
Yeah, thanks for all your hard work for the last 4 years on the plans. And I think it was something that needed to be done. And the level of outreach that you did, I think, is amazing and was necessary to do. And we're going to have to continue that process as we move forward. I agree with Harvey. I think we need to concentrate on learning about and educating people about incentives and rebates. I think that's really important. The financial ramifications for most of us are very large. It's a costly process. But there's more money being thrown at solving this problem than ever before. So we want to make sure our community gets our fair share of that funding. I will say, personally, I'd like to see all of us, globally working harder and faster on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We're on a terrible trajectory. But I think, taking steps like this, offers hope for, by taking positive action that we can make a difference locally. And I think we have to. I don't think we have a choice morally. I think we have to be doing this, and we have to be doing more as we go along. So I'm not going to suggest anything different at this point, except that, with the exception of a couple of people had told me that they'd be willing to be ambassadors to others to talk about their experience doing solar and batteries and electric kitchens and things like that. So if there are people really willing to do that, we should take them up on it, and talk about an ambassador program. I think people like to hear from their neighbors and their neighbor experiences. The neighbors have already gone through the contracting process. They know who does what, who's good, where the incentives are. So in combining with more formal outreach and education, enlist, volunteers to get out there and talk to people, hold workshops, put them in the library. We're here to tell you our experience and want to help you. So I like the neighbor-to-neighbor approach. I am glad that you mentioned natural and working lands. I think, as we've seen from your report, that it's going to take a lot of different pieces, to get a handle on our emissions. And so we can't really leave any stone unturned. And natural and working lands does, offer a hope of, with certain kinds of practices of helping, sequester carbon. So I'm glad that we have a little piece in here about that. But I just want to say, I think we're on a good path. Thank you for the hard work you've done. And I think you did a nice presentation tonight. So.
Thank you. I guess I agree with everything that all of the other council members have said tonight. I have two thoughts. One is I have a friend who recently put in a heat pump and was told that she'd be getting a rebate by PC&E. Turns out she was wrong. She did not get a rebate. And the reason is she didn't replace a heating system with a new heat pump. But they didn't tell her that. So the idea that people are misinformed is a critical piece of this. The education part is incredibly important. The other thing I think that we as a city can do is we can put a lot of our effort into making sure our municipal buildings are electrified and are not just electrified, but that we reduce any kind of green gas emissions. A third thing I want to say is my kids come to visit me once every couple of weeks, and they spend the night, and they both have electric vehicles. And they spend half of their time looking for a charging station that isn't broken or that isn't being used. And, you know, I want to spend time with them. I don't want to have them out driving their car around, creating greenhouse gas emissions, even though it's electric, trying to find a charging station. So I think we need to be on top of that in our city too. I think it's as important to me personally as it is going to be to our tourists coming into town. I know there are tourists that come in looking for electric charging stations and they can't find them. They're being used, because I know if my kids can't find them, and the only time they can get one is after 6 o'clock at night or 7 o'clock at night. You wanted to redress that. I could tell you're anxious to say something.
I do. I have one comment that I wanted to make about the charging stations, because there was a little bit of a hiccup with our accounts with ChargePoint, where we basically our city chargers were not under warranty anymore. And unfortunately, a lot of them, because they weren't under warranty, we weren't getting notified. All of this to say, we've worked it out with ChargePoint, and they've gone and they've fixed the chargers. There is, I believe, the ones at the library that are still, we're still working out the kinks with that one. But we did have a lot of our chargers that were down for a while, but we've
When
we've
did you
been
get
working
them
with
back
it.
up?
I'm sorry?
When did you get them back up?
I 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Okay, so
The one-
maybe that's since my kids have not been here
Yeah, but
since then.
if not, if your kids come back and they're trying to use a city charger that's not
There's
working.
still, and it's not just that they're not working, there are also too
Full.
few of them.
Yeah.
So we need more of those.
Definitely.
I think I would also like to have us look at the ambassador program that Councilmember Ruddock spoke to. And I'd like to have ambassadors for and people with bad experiences to come forward too. I think if people get the truth about what's going on and what it's going to cost, and there's no mystery around it, we have a much better chance of convincing people to do it. We all talk about all these rebates and all this money that's out there for, you know, climate adaptation, but where's the money? You know, how much is it? When's it coming? How do I get it? So I think education is a key part of this. And I also would like to see us have PC&E come back and reinforce the ease with which people can do something by paying their electric bill through PC&E and getting their energy through PC&E.
97% of the people in Half Moon Bay get their energy through.
Not 100% of their energy. They get some of their energy.
No. All the electrical energy that they get comes through PC&E, 97%. That's why Veronica's chart showed that we had a 25% reduction in greenhouse gases after PCE turned on. So
So if I'm on a program which is a 30% program with PC&E,
Yeah.
they have their 100% program and they have their 30% program.
I can.
You know
speak a
what I'm
little bit to
talking
that,
about,
yeah.
Veronica.
So so Peninsula Clean Energy, when they were first formed, everybody was automatically opted in, and people had a choice to opt out. So 3% of the accounts in Half Moon Bay have opted out. So 90% of our accounts are opted in to at least the base level of PCE. PCE has 2 tiers. They have their Eco tier, or I don't know
Eco
the names.
100 and
Eco 100 and then their
yeah.
base. I don't remember what the base is called. But so when they were first formed, the base tier was not all clean energy. There was a percentage difference. But as of 2021, they've procured enough contracts that now 100%, even at their base tier, is clean. Clean is a term that's defined at the federal level, so there's like very specific terms that indicate what that is. That base level has wind, solar, some geothermal, some like methane from landfills that gets burned off into cleaner energy, hydropower. Some of those are not considered to be renewable. When you get to that Eco 100 tier, that's 100% renewable energy. So that's the difference. It used to be that you didn't, by their base tier, it wasn't all clean, but now as of 2021, it is.
So there's no difference?
There's no difference as far as greenhouse gas emissions are concerned.
It's slight difference. You pay 1 cent more per kilowatt hour to enroll in Eco 100, and that is all solar and wind, period. The base level is 1 cent a kilowatt hour cheaper, and it's all renewable, but it includes things like large hydro, which technically, it's a question of whether or not they're considered renewable or not. But there's no greenhouse gas emissions from anything that you would buy from PCE.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, I have a couple of quick comments, if that's all right.
Sure.
Okay.
I had one more, but you
Okay,
go
you go.
first.
All right.
You go first.
No, I agree with Joaquin that we can't, we must be mindful of what a lot of people in our community can't afford about trying to reduce greenhouse gases. There's no question that that's true. My point is that if we get enough education and the early adapters of clean energy make it clear why they like it, that will encourage others to join. And what's going to happen is inevitably the price of clean energy is going to go down. Solar is already going down. EVs are becoming cheaper. There's more used EVs on the market. Buying natural gas is going to go way up because of its lack of, it won't be as plentiful. So the market forces are going to actually be in favor of making things cheaper. I'm not saying it's going to be free, but if we start with the education of our community as to the benefits of greenhouse gas emissions, we get PCE to come and tell us about some of the ways that they can make the pain less. I think that's a good start. And then inevitably, I think prices are going to come down, and the people who don't adapt immediately will be encouraged to take advantage of the greenhouse gas lowering. So that's my 2 cents.
Great. I wanted to just ask a question of staff, and this may be really off the wall, but I'm thinking we have our new Economic Development Center. Is that what we're calling it? Community?
The Opportunity Center of the
Opportunity Center
Coastside.
of the Coastside.
OCC.
I'm going to remember that. Opportunity, okay. Is there any way we can get them involved in looking for green energy clients to come to Half Moon Bay? I mean, you know, I just think that's a perfect place, and now's the perfect time. So
One of the areas we are exploring, or phases we're exploring with the OCC, is the incubator option. And there's actually been some very active meetings this week regarding that. And part of doing that is finding the right focus to convince people that they should come here and participate. And regenerative ag, energy, climate, those are all things that have a tie to the coast. And so, obviously, we have a lot of work to do to encourage something like that, but that's all on the table right now and being discussed. So I can't make any promises, but we're hopeful that that is exactly the direction we're going. If Half Moon Bay could become a leader in startups around energy and the climate, it's hard to keep them here, but maybe we can at least get people started here and create an infrastructure for that. It's a whole new industry, changes our economy. That's the kind of thinking we're having. It's a huge lift. It's going to require a lot of collaboration with other folks, but we actually have found some pretty unique people in the community that are helping with this.
That's great. I think the regenerative agriculture is something that might keep people here.
Exactly.
Because it's already here in
We
a
have
sense.
the infrastructure
We
for
do
some
have
of
it,
that. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Can I add to that?
Sure.
So there was a good article in the New York Times this morning about the movement toward land-based aquaculture. So aquaculture using pens, in marine waters has created all sorts of problems, water quality, pests like lice, fish lice and things like that. So there's some firms now doing it, like in Florida and New York and I think Maine, and they're doing it on land and warehouse-type buildings, but it creates a high-value fish crop, and it's done better so that the fish are actually healthier, and they're using more sustainable practices. So I think aquaculture is an area that sort of ties in with the coast. If there's land to be had, for a facility, and given the decline of anadromous salmon-type fish stocks and actually fisheries around the world, creating gene pools for land-based aquaculture is like the new thing. So I think that ought to be on the list for potential incubators. And there may be people at the harbor interested in doing this, but could create jobs, sustainable, relatively low carbon footprint. Actually, the article said a lower carbon footprint than marine-based aquaculture, believe it or not.
Interesting.
There's not a lot of electric boats floating around fishing, right? That's diesel.
So, I would just, check that article and let's make a pitch to have that on our list.
I will pass that along to Karen and the team.
All right.
Cool.
Land-based aquaculture.
Great, thank you. If there are no more comments from council, do you have the direction that you need?
Did we do any public comment? Are there any comments? I don't know.
I'm sorry, I didn't
I
hear.
don't know if we did, if there's public comment.
Do we have any public comment? We didn't get any
I
cards.
think we asked for public comment, and they
Yeah.
said there wasn't any.
So Maz and Veronica, do you feel like we have the direction? Maybe you can just share what our next steps are.
Yeah, so we will take what we heard today. I heard a lot about education and looking at incentives and the costs, some things about businesses and some incubator opportunities. So we'll incorporate some of that feedback into the draft plan, and then we'll bring it back for finalization and adoption.
Great, thank you. It was a wonderful report.
Thanks.
Now we move on to items for future discussion, possible agenda items. Councilmember Ruddock.
Yes, I'd like to bring to a upcoming council meeting a discussion of the Black Lives Matter mural on the side of City Hall.
Okay, I'll second that. Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, you gave me direction at the last meeting to talk to PCE about coming here to talk about the opportunities. So I would like to agendize that. If you can give me a date certain, then I can talk to the people at PCE to show up.
Okay, staff will work with you on that.
Great. Can you work with Harvey on that? Great. Anybody else? All right. Any city council reports? All right. Hearing none, I will adjourn this wonderful meeting. Thank you.
Good job, Moz and Veronica, and Matt, and Denise.